put you right at the end of commissioner comments, right around where the chief's report usually goes, since you're standing in for him today.
Well, thanks, Sean. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sean Adams. I'm a transplant here from Salem Police. I've been here, I don't know, we're coming on 2 years now. And I currently lead the investigations division for the police department. Happy to be here, and thanks to all of you for having me.
Thanks, Captain. So to start off with today, we got a review of agenda. It is lovely to see you all. A couple of main things going on today. We'll be discussing the domestic violence and restraining orders policy, and we will be conducting our officer elections for chair and vice chair for the next year. We will also do a little bit of start out the downtown safety conversation, going based off our work plan, getting an early start even before it's been approved by the city council. I wanted to jump into it. So yeah, any objections to the agenda as it is today? Seeing none, I'm going to take that as unanimous consent, and we can move on to public comment. If there's anybody who would like to give public comment today, please go ahead and just raise your hand. I will call on you when we get there. Or, well, if you raise your hand, rather. I'm not seeing any of those either. So, liaison reports. Michael, do you want to take us away with the liaison report, and then Amanda?
Absolutely. So the Civilian Review Board met 2 days ago, and we discussed the investigation into the shooting, the use of deadly force in what you all recall November 30th, 2019. There was a lot of discussion about the length of time it took for that report to reach the CRB and the various reasons for that. I think there was a good deal of criticism all the way around for everyone involved on that. And so starting with IDFIT on down. So if you want to know more, you can watch the meeting, I think, or read the minutes.
Excellent.
I'll just add, it was a really long and emotional and difficult conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for your report. Amanda?
Yeah, so for Human Rights Commission, we are continuing to work on an ad campaign around bias crimes reporting. So we have some ads coming out. We were going to do bus ads, but the LTD has discontinued doing the type of ads that we wanted to do. So we're looking at doing some ads in the Eugene Weekly around who can report, or where to report bias crimes and how and what counts as a bias crime. So trying to fit all of that into an ad and not too many words. So we're hoping to have that done by the end of June. So that's exciting. And then in our last meeting, one of our work groups has been working on a COVID impact report. And it's all around how COVID has impacted some of the marginalized communities in the city. And that's been great. We've done some work around that, around looking at vaccine accessibility and barriers to getting vaccination and that sort of thing. So that's been great. We'll keep talking about that. And then related to that, we did a listening session with the Asian American Pacific Islander community. And Captain Adams was there, and that was great. And thank you for coming. And other folks were there. And it was a pretty good conversation, not quite as robust, I think, as we had wanted. And I think we'll probably need to think about ways to make it more accessible to folks going forward. So more work to come there. Oh, and then lastly, I was just going to say, June is our last HRC meeting until September. We don't meet in July and August, and we'll be doing our annual retreat this summer, where we'll work on our work plan. So that is what I have for HRC.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Let's go forward with our commissioner comments. Let's start with V and then Ian.
I don't have anything to comment on right now. Thank you.
Thanks, V. Ian and then Dallas.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. I just wanted to say that the Whitaker Community Council, a nonprofit that I serve on the board of, is hosting a vaccine clinic this Sunday. We're going to be hosting vaccine clinics in partnership with Lane County Public Health on the second Sundays and last Fridays from at least June until August. Shout out to Amanda, who wears the HIV Alliance Program Director hat, if I'm not mistaken, who's going to be working with us, and we're looking to support STI testing. At our Sunday clinic, we're going to have food trucks and haircuts and looking to co-locate services. So I know it seems as if the world's reopening, but there are a lot of folks, some who are undocumented, some who are unhoused, some who are vaccine hesitant or vaccine passive. I work at the University of Oregon, and there's folks who have PhDs, who are scientists, who are as yet unvaccinated. So lots of different reasons. And then I will share with Jeremy the links to schedule and the information about the clinic. So would be super grateful if y'all could share that with your networks, because what we've heard from Lane County Public Health is that the more regular the clinics are and the smaller in scale, we're going to be doing 25 to 50 vaccinations per clinic, the more likely that folks who are vaccine passive or vaccine hesitant will show up. It'll almost like be getting a tattoo with a friend. It's like, oh, well, you're here, I might as well come with you. So yeah, thanks for listening in. And like I said, I'll share that information with Jeremy.
Thanks, Ian. Dallas and then Jennifer.
I have a few things just kind of want to keep everybody in the mix on. First, with the fundraising for the American Cancer Society, you see me with the pink glasses. Currently, our commission, as far as raising money for breast cancer awareness, we're currently #1 in Lane County. We're #1 in the state of Oregon, and we're #7 in the country. That's where we are right now. That's where we stand. And I want to commend everybody who passes the word on, and we've gotten a lot of participation. And also a big thank you to the Eugene Police. Their employee union, their employee charitable union did a donation as well. And there was a presentation with a member of that union, and Navasha, hopefully I said that right. She was there as well, and it was a nice PR for what we do when we're looking out for the community. That's one. Two, I was asked by some members of the Asian community to speak with them as far as putting together, similar to what I do with my platform on Facebook, where I connect Black business leaders, is a place where they can connect, which is about 900 members now. I've had a nice meeting with Jacina Hawkins, who's going to be starting up that with a fellow Asian businessman. And I brought Commissioner V with me to that meeting. And I believe we gained a lot of insight and information as far as how we can help build bridges between the Asian community and policing, as well as just overall in general. Also, recently I met with Captain Sherry Meisel, who talked to me about her community outreach program. She wanted to speak with me because of my connections with the business community, and we will be putting together something for downtown businesses or businesses in general, as far as finding out which areas they feel that they might need some help as far as policing is concerned. Ian kind of brought it up, something about Lane County. I got connected also recently with the Lane County Public Health, who knew that I had a platform with over 800 Black business professionals. And they sent me a link where folk could connect if they wanted to do like a venue for vaccinations, how to contact Mo Young with Lane County Public Health. So I told them they were 100% welcome to put all the information that they want to help reach a marginalized community, and they have my support. So that's on my page now. That is it as far as my comments.
Cool. Thank you, Dallas. Jennifer, and then Bonnie.
Thanks. I don't have any other comments except for Dallas. I love the glasses. They're amazing. And thanks for all the work it sounds like you've been doing.
Thank you.
Lovely. Bonnie and then Alan.
I also don't have a comment.
Thanks, Bonnie. Alan and then Michael, if you have personal comments rather than as liaison.
Yeah, just one, Dallas, that was an amazing report. When do you find time to do work? The council took the ad hoc committee on police policy recommendations and are having our 3 employees, the city manager, the chief, the police auditor, and the judge, put them in buckets for us to kind of help us process that. And we asked them to come back to us with a process suggestion about how they're going to do that before we go on summer break. And so stay tuned for that. I think they're coming back sometime in the beginning of July.
Thanks, Alan. Michael and then Silver.
Yeah, so I'd forgotten so this isn't a personal comment, but just a continuation of my CRB report. I've forgotten that one of the members of the CRB had wanted me to be sure to let the police commission know that there was a desire for the auditor and the CRB to have more of a role in IDFIT and use of force investigations. I'm not sure exactly how that, I know that if it is sort of out of the jurisdiction, but since it was raised, I'm conveying it.
Thank you. Yeah, to that, we have had some talks about IDFIT that got interrupted with COVID. We're going to have Patty join us to give us more insight into that, and we unfortunately missed that last meeting, but the previous meetings are on the website. You can look them up. Jeremy, if you can send out that link to the past meeting video, I think that's probably the best way to do it. Silver and then Amanda, if you have personal comment.
Yeah, thank you. I am really glad that the ad hoc committee is over. I can go back to being my happy, jovial self again and not being somebody who's a stickler for a bunch of different things, and pressing forward with this commission. I love this work. So thanks.
Thanks, Silver. Amanda and then Chantel.
Yeah, I just want to say I was really excited to see the agenda items today. Domestic violence is something that I feel pretty passionate about, and then also the downtown safety. I've had great experiences working with Sergeant Smith, and I'm excited to work with Sergeant Magnuson around some of the things that in my work life have worked on. And then also, thanks, Ian, we're excited to work with Whitaker Community Council too. And I wanted to just make a quick plug that we'll also be giving out naloxone kits. So opiate overdoses are always happening and increasing. And so if people need naloxone kits, HIV Alliance has them, and we'll have them at that event as well. And they are free.
Thank you very much. Chantel and then myself.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. I know you guys, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know you guys can't see me and I'm actually at work. I couldn't get out of work, but I didn't want to miss the meeting with y'all. So I am listening. I might be a little bit quiet here and there, but like I said, it's nice to be back with all of you.
Thanks, Chantel. Thank you for joining us. And for my own, I don't really have any comments at this time. Just happy to see you all.
Sorry. I did actually want to say something.
Oh, sorry. Did I miss you, Bonnie?
No, you didn't. I just forgot that I wanted to say this. Sorry. I really appreciated the email from Marty Wilder. I really appreciate all the recommendations that were in there that specifically, one that jumped out at me that seemed pretty simple was the idea of having cards that the police officers hand out. I really like that idea. Look into that, and that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Bonnie. Yeah, so I have no comment. Double checking, seeing if we have any public comments. Still looks like no public comments. So we can move on to a chief's report. Don't expect much. If there's anything you think we should know, Captain Adams, about stuff that's coming up before we get to the domestic violence specific topic that we brought you on for, now's an excellent opportunity to share.
No, I don't know if any of you are aware, Chief had an emergency and he's kind of out of commission for a few days, I think. So I'll do my best to challenge Chief. It's hard task for sure. But I did check in with him before the meeting and he had nothing that he felt should be shared or needed to be shared, I guess would be a better term. So
cool.
Nothing.
Thank you very much. With that, let's move on to the domestic violence and restraining orders policy. Sergeant Nelson, do you want to start off with anything?
I don't know that I really need to. I think Captain Adams is probably going to be able to really get into the meat of this thing. And then if there's some stuff after that that I can touch on, I'll be happy to do so if you're good with that, Captain.
Yes, sir. And if you guys are good with me, I'm going to do my best to share a PowerPoint here.
Yeah, let's do it.
But bear with me.
So yeah, we'll start off with informational and then we'll move into feedback that we have. Are you okay with us raising questions as they come?
Yes, sir.
Cool.
All right, hold on a minute. Doesn't like that. Yeah. All right, hopefully I didn't lose you guys here.
No, we can see you.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll stand by this and go on. At least one good thing came out of COVID. 19 months ago, I had never been able to do that. So,
cool.
And here, and I did prepare a little slideshow for today, just kind of run through domestic violence. And it's very short, but it'll mostly just keep me on task for some of the things that we're talking about when it comes to domestic violence. And there is some things here right off the get-go that I really wanted the commission and our community to understand and recognize. And that is our current state of domestic violence. And you guys, you can read these numbers for yourself, but when we see a 33.6% increase in domestic violence, and these numbers represent domestic violence incidents that we've responded to where we've arrested what we would consider the aggressor in these cases. So we're looking at a 33.6 increase over 5 years. Number of victims increased 29.1. 1,000 incidents in 2020 where an arrest was made. But below that, you'll note that we have 1,144 victims, which means the difference between 1,144 and 1,023 is 121 other victims in some of these incidents. And what that tells you is when we're responding to domestic violence incidents, there's other incidents of violence within a household. And what we're looking at is 121 children or other family members in a home that were also victims of the domestic violence in these situations. And last but not least, which is maybe certainly not least, pretty forefront in our efforts right now, a 224% increase in domestic violence charges. The secondary charge is violation of restraining order, and that's in 2020. So what that number tells you is the restraining order process really is not working because these offenders are getting back into the homes and they're reoffending, and the numbers are pretty staggering when we look at that. So those are indicators that we as an agency and holistically as a community need to do something to address the numbers.
Okay. I have some questions before we jump on. First, for myself, is there any indication that reporting has improved, or is that still, we all know domestic violence is underreported. If the numbers are going up and they're still being underreported, is that what we're seeing?
Yeah, some of this is a gut check thing because it is difficult to tell exactly what the impact is in our community, but certainly we know that domestic violence is underreported. And I think this is pretty close to a factual statement in that what we've seen occur over the last year, which has sown a little bit of mistrust or lack of trust in law enforcement, has certainly not helped us in having some of these incidents reported. In other words, if our trust in the community has been eroded, which we know it has been, and we're trying to rebuild that trust, one of the kickers of that is, you know, victims are going to be less likely to want to report domestic violence to us. And, you know, to go off to a different track here, there's other factors that we have involved here that lead into it underreporting. We have a large homeless community, and so therefore you have a financial security blanket sometimes in these offenses or between these offenders. In other words, a victim may be relying on the aggressor for financial support and otherwise. I mean, times are tough. That's factoring in COVID. You know, we have more people that are stay at home, they're not out. And so some of the communication pieces that would be reporting through a third party are not occurring either. So we know these numbers are underreported, Sean, and you know, I'll get to kind of some of the things we're doing to try to address that here in a moment, but I see some other questions.
Yeah, so I have one more, and then I see 3 hands up. So my second one is, you mentioned that you arrested the person you determined to be the aggressor. Is there a specific training on that as part of the investigation?
Yes, sir. And so again, I'll talk about a little bit of this.
I figured you would.
Part of it is that is delineated in Oregon revised statutes, where it talks about for us as police officers to try to determine who the aggressor in a situation is and make the arrest of who would be the aggressive party. We train on that as well, and we go into, you can have situations where there's some back and forth. What we'll do is look for defensive injuries on victims. It's pretty easy to tell when you've had a physical confrontation where we see defensive injuries versus, I guess, what you would call offensive injuries. Mm-hmm. So all of that factors into our investigations into domestic violence complaints.
Cool. So I see Michael, Amanda, Alan, and then V.
Wow.
So Michael first?
Yeah, hopefully mine will be short. I was just wondering, do you have a stat on how many dual arrest incidents, how many of the incidents are dual arrest?
That I do not have. And I will tell you that it is strongly discouraged to arrest both parties. And it's not that it doesn't happen, but that's one of the things that we as investigators really have to ferret through and identify who is the primary investigator in this. Occasionally, and it's very, very infrequent, you know, we can't determine it. We've got, you know, a knockdown drag out between 2 parties. You know, at the end of the day, sometimes we arrest both parties, but I can check on that, Michael, and I can report back to the commission.
That'd be great. Thank you. I know that like 20 or 30 years ago, when law enforcement agencies were new to the mandatory arrest law, the dual arrests were more frequent. And so I appreciate the fact that in the policy for EPD that there is explicit statement that does not have to happen, and to hear from you that it's discouraged.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Amanda, and then Alan.
All right, I apologize if you answered this and I missed it, but what do you attribute the increases to?
Well, a whole combination of things. We may be better at investigating. That may be one of them. We may have more reporting coming from the community. We have more awareness, certainly within the community. As time's gone on, the awareness of domestic violence has certainly increased. So those things all factor into an increase. But at the end of the day, I think really we have to point to, we have an escalation of violence and domestic violence in our community. I don't know that you can reach any other conclusion when you look at these numbers, because it's not like we ran a gigantic relations campaign or anything otherwise. And that may be the most discouraging part about all of this. is when you look at those raw numbers. So.
Can I ask one more question? I'm sorry. I was just wondering, do you know who is usually the person reporting? Is it folks overhearing violence and like reporting on neighbors, or is it frequently people within the household? I don't know if you have any data on that.
That one's a little bit difficult for me to be able to drill down right on that. I can give you the cop gut check on that, and it's about 50-50. Neighbors will report hearing the yelling, screaming, kids will report, and then we'll get, both parties will report to us or the victim. So it's really, it could be a whole variety of different ways.
Thank you.
Alan, and then V.
Captain, can you go back a slide?
Yes, sir.
So that 30, Amanda asked the same question. I was getting at one of my questions, which was, why is this occurring? But between 16 and 20, 33.6% increase. Are we seeing that as a just an upward climb, or has a lot of that increase been attributed to the last year of the pandemic? I'm trying to get at the pandemic impacts of this.
Yeah, like that's a great question.
What's the 19 to 20 numbers?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have seen some outliers. I think 2017 was an outlier year, but I do have a graph somewhere, and I'm sorry, I thought about it, I'd have thrown it in here, but by and large, we're seeing, for the most part, a upward curve. So certainly, I guarantee it. 2020 was not an outlier in any way. It was consistent with our growth. And I think it was 2017 where we had a spike in outlier, which led to the overall 33.6 increase, obviously, but yes.
The other question, I have one more question. The other question is about the restraining orders. This number, this statistic's startling. It basically says that it doesn't work. Restraining orders are of limited value. Is that what I should be taking away from that, Captain?
Ooh, yeah, one of the things we talked about with domestic violence victims, and one of the things that we instill in our police officers, is you cannot rely on a restraining order to stop violence. I think any one of us can recognize, and we see nationwide, that it just really, it lacks the teeth that it needs to be able to do the things that we want to have done. And now the 224% increase in 2020, we did have an outlier the previous year. So the number is a little bit skewed in this case, going back to the question before, Counselor. So our 224% increase in 2020 is a little bit skewed because it is an outlier. However, we do see an upward trend on violations of restraining order with a secondary charge. And so, later on in this presentation, I do have some things that we're looking at to try to address this.
So basically, I'm trying to figure out what that means. So when you get a restraining order, and then if the person comes at you and violates it, by the time you call the police and get there and all of that, the damage may have already done, so to speak, but they're still going to get a violation of that restraining order, whether or not you actually see them there or not. They still can get a violation.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are specific cases where we've gone to another domestic violence incident and arrested for a domestic violence charge, where we found later or at the time of arrest that the individual had a restraining order placed, and that was involving this particular victim.
Oh, wow. Okay, thanks.
Sir, can I tack on to just one thing with that as well? So with that increase too, especially for the violation of restraining orders, we call them VROs, but especially in 2020, what I realized just on the street myself personally is that victims are relying on whoever was arrested previously. And when there's that restraining order there, that prohibits them from getting some of the resources that they need. I know resources in general were also pretty hemmed up with TV related stuff. So it's also making sure that we're getting our victims the resources that they need in order to actually keep the perpetrator away, because typically that's part of their, survivability.
Thank you. V, and then I have Dallas. I thought I saw a hand. V?
Yeah, Captain Adams, what are the intervention steps taken when the victims are unwilling to cooperate with the responding officers? For example, if they refuse to press charges for, number of reasons, the aggressor and the victims share the same home. Maybe there's a reliance on the aggressor's, ability to help contribute or pay rent, bills, utilities, etc. Sometimes it's a cultural thing, for some, in certain culture, you don't incriminate your spouse. And so I am wondering what are the intervention steps that are taken in that scenario?
So the Domestic Violence Abuse Prevention Act is specific, as is Oregon law. And this is one of the only places that I know of in Oregon law where you do not have to have a willing victim. And so if we go to a domestic violence incident and we establish that a crime has occurred, in other words, one party has assaulted another, whether that person wants to be a victim of a crime or not, once we've established that this did occur and we have probable cause for arrest, we are actually required by Oregon law. It's written into statute. We are required to make an arrest. We cannot walk from that. And so, and that goes all the way back to, I think, the late 80s, 88, 89, which started the nationwide domestic violence and the abuse prevention acts out of an incident out of Florida that had a similar deal where the officers had been there previously and did not make an arrest. And so an assault or a menacing or any type of a higher level of crime than that, we are required to make an arrest. And that takes all the decision-making out of it. That's the catalyst to remove the violence from the home. And I think I answered that, B.
Yeah, you did. But I still am wondering, how do you determine that is warranting an arrest if the victim is not willing to provide you with some information? Do you look at bruises? Do you look at, if there's bleeding or bruises, things like that as evidence?
Yeah, you nailed it. So we look at the injuries on the individuals. We'll take statements from individuals. Looking around the home can often reveal some good quality evidence. Our officers are trained to do very good investigations when it comes to domestic violence. And they look for all these things, and they're very good at determining when a crime has occurred and who's the aggressor. And quite frankly and candidly, once we reach a point where we've established probable cause, we're going to make an arrest. And that threshold can be fairly small in these type of cases. And we're pretty good at that. The other thing is that the law and case law has allowed us is any statements made to us by both suspect and victim, regardless of whether they want to cooperate or not, if it's within 24 hours of the event, those are admissible in court. So if we're interviewing a suspect of a domestic violence event, we don't know that they're a suspect yet, and therefore we've not advised of any type of Miranda right, their statements to us are still admissible in court in these cases. So the legislature has been very good and proactive in providing the domestic violence laws that we have here in Oregon and across the country are very well written and very well, they're very thoughtful.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Dallas, and then we can move on with your presentation.
So my question is, if the police are doing a good investigation, which I believe they are, and then someone is arrested, how soon is the person released after they're arrested? That's part of the question.
Yeah, so that could almost be immediate. So we could take an individual to jail with a domestic violence charge, and a couple of things could happen, or three things actually. They could be lodged and held in custody till arraignment, which would be the next morning. They could bail, they could post bail and be released from jail. Usually doesn't happen. Or they could be recognized on a release agreement of some kind where they essentially sign a contract to say, I won't do A, B, or C, go back and see the victim, live in the home or otherwise. And in any one of those cases, they could be out relatively quickly. So,
okay. So what I'm hearing is, in a domestic violence situation, you could get there. Someone could literally be beating the hell out of someone. There's tons and tons of bruises. And before the injuries are healed, the person who did it could be back out to do it again.
Yes.
Okay. So
actually very frequently.
So the issue is that what's at issue is a weak restraining order or something. That's it right there. Is that right? Now that's where we're going back in that circle and circle and circle and circle. The same rodeo. So who is it? The district attorney who determines that that person stays in there longer?
Yeah,
it doesn't get out at all.
Yeah, it can be the district attorney. Sometimes it's the not the supervisor at the jail. I forget the proper term for the person at the jail, but they'll have individuals in the jail that are working just solely on recog. Who do we keep? Who do we go? Because their jails are operating at capacity. And so they'll cap people out of the jail and hold those are the worst offenders that we have. And so presumably, a domestic violence assault suspect would be somebody we would hold in custody, but that doesn't always it doesn't always go that way.
And because of that not going that way, you have those numbers that we're looking at today.
In part, yes. Certainly a restraining order, we could have violation of that at any time after the report or the order is initiated. And most of the time, a restraining order is not initiated right after a domestic violence event. But I should also comment on this, that I have violation of restraining order in place here, but that also includes our violation of release agreements. So when we take a domestic violence suspect in, even after they're arraigned, so let's say we take them to jail, they're arraigned on the charges, court date set, they're released on what's known as a release agreement, which is very similar to restraining order. And it will keep the same things in place. You won't contact the victim, you won't go to the home. Most of these are pretty standard. So it's a little misleading when I say violation of restraining order, it's also violation of release agreement as well. So there's so many different aspects to this. But when I move on here, you'll see we've got some things coming down the tube that we think will help with some of these numbers.
Thank you. Yeah, do you want to continue with the presentation? I know I have one more question, but I don't want to take up all the time before we're even through it.
I'm done. Yeah.
Sweet.
Got through one whole slide.
Just to kind of recap what we do right now. Domestic violence call right now, we determine that there's been an assault or whatever the crime's been committed. We arrest an individual and we're left with a victim. What we do is we provide the victim a pre-printed victim rights card that has some information on resources and others for them. There's a little bit of bedside manner there from our officers with a victim-centric approach to talk through some of these incidents. However, we're running call to call and there's just not that ability. And unfortunately, police officers aren't really very good at advocacy. So what happens is there is no victim support. So our victims of our domestic violence are not supported until the suspect is arraigned at the Lane County Courthouse. And when that happens, once the individual's arraigned, then the Lane County Victims Assistance Program, who are fabulous, by the way, will engage with our victim and then they'll provide some wraparound services. So as you can see on the slide here, here's the problem. We go out on a Friday at 5 o'clock and we arrest somebody for a domestic violence incident and we take them to jail. Let's say it's a holiday weekend. So Monday is a holiday, the courts aren't working. We don't see an arraignment till, let's say, it's Tuesday morning. So we have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 4 days at least where our victim has had zero advocacy and zero support. And what happens in that period of time? The individual gets out of jail, they recontact the victim, say, don't you help with prosecution? They go back and violate the release agreement. They interfere with the victim feels unsupported. They don't want to continue with the process. So then they become, uncooperative. And the cycle perpetuates itself a little bit in that we're missing a gap. And you see at the bottom of the slide, we need to change this dynamic. So right now, the way we operate is 1990s police work. That's what it was like when I started my career. You go to a domestic violence thing, you hand the victim a card, and out the door you go, and you're on the next call. That is not where we want to be. And that is definitely a dynamic that we need to change. And that is to bring in a more victim-centric approach to what we're doing. And that comes from a victims assistance program.
So I have a couple questions for this slide. And it's going off what Dallas started with, which is, first question is, how many jail beds are we contracted with the local jail?
That I don't know. I'll have to find out for you.
I believe it's 15. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But before the CSI kicks in, the last I heard, we had 15 beds at the local jail. And that when we have 200 some % of folks violating their arraignment, that does not seem workable to me. Second question I had was how many additional beds were in the community safety initiative? That number I don't know offhand, but I know it was supposed to help out with that issue.
Yeah, I don't know on that one either. I'd have to look.
Excellent. Those were my first two questions. Jeremy?
So as far as the jail beds are concerned, there were 15 through Lane County, and there were another 10 through the city of Springfield. The CSI included another 5. However, because of COVID, those are not accurate counts. So apologize to make that clear as mud, but if you're to go look at policy, that's not technically what they are at the moment. So hopefully that helps. And yeah, we can look into that.
Yeah, it's a serious question we've discussed here at the commission before. It keeps coming up with so many of these issues, and I know domestic violence is extremely sensitive, but without extra jail beds, not much we can do on that front anyway. Michael, and then V.
Yeah, real quick, that last bullet point, is that a lead into the next slide? In which case I'll hold my question.
Yes, it is.
Cool. V?
Hi, Captain Adams. Are there any arrangements for both to ensure that both female and male officers are available to respond to these domestic calls? You know, especially if the victim is a female, victim. And then my part 2 question is, if the caller is limited English speaking, or is hearing impaired, are there any arrangement for an interpreter to, be with the officer when they respond?
Yeah, great questions. So as best we can, we would try to get female officer to the scene, but we are limited. We're first of all with our resource, and then secondly with our resource deployment. So where and when we can, we'll try to tailor our response to whatever the needs are. If we were to go to something and we had a female victim who only wanted to talk to a female officer, we would certainly make that happen, or vice versa, a male officer. We would make those accommodations. It just sometimes would take a little bit of time for us. As to interpretation or interpreter services, we utilize language line. And so if we were to go to something where there was limited language and we did not have somebody on duty that was a recognized or certified interpreter in that language, then we would utilize a language line. It's a little cumbersome because you have to put your phone on speaker and you have to, talk back and forth, but it does work. And so that is what we have in place. For major Measure 11 and your significant crimes, we are required to bring an interpreter into the investigation. So I'll just harken back to my previous experience in Salem in command of an investigative team. we had to call a Chukanese interpreter one night because we had individuals from the Solomon Islands. Good luck finding an interpreter in that, but we had some crimes. And so we were able to do that. We do the same thing here in Eugene. We have a list of interpreters, and we'll bring them in if we have major crimes. So yeah.
Okay.
We're pretty good at it.
Excellent. I see Bonnie's hand up, and then I think we'll be good with this round.
Just to clarify for myself, you said that there are 3 ways or reasons that somebody might leave the jail pretty quickly. It might be arraignment, posting bail, and release upon agreement. Were you implying also, or how did this come up, the whole extra beds on the jail? Like, you know, do you have a limited amount of beds, and one of the reasons that people get released is because there aren't enough beds?
That's correct.
Yep.
Oh. How often does it happen?
Every night. It's ongoing. We take people to jail, and, you know, quite frankly, they may be out of jail before we're out of jail with our paperwork and everything. You know, and we recognize this on the police side. I mean, to some degree, that's just kind of the way it is. We have limited resources. We have limited jail beds. It becomes a little disheartening as a police officer when you go out and investigate a crime, take somebody to jail, and they're out immediately. But we really have to keep those highest level offenders in jail. And, you know, this is a case where, you know, at some point, maybe we will have some additional jail space, or something will happen that'll change this dynamic a little bit. But right now, no, we don't have that.
Thanks, Bonnie. Captain, do you want to continue?
I have one brief, Sean.
Dallas?
Really, this is just a statement of fact. I believe that we go to a domestic situation like that, and someone has become a victim, and we're allowing 4, 5, or how many days to go by. That's a shame. And that is a crime, in my opinion, itself. So whatever district attorney or whatever the deal to stop that, I believe is a direct reason why those numbers are up like that, because we're allowing it to keep on happening and happening. Nothing's happening to the person who's the offender, you know, so there lies a problem.
Thanks, Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas, thank you, because I think you've done my whole presentation for me now. You can see in a minute where we're going here. So there's a couple of different evolutions of where we're trying to go as an agency when we're looking at this. One of the first things that, you know, coming in with an outside perspective can always be bad, but can be good as well. And in this case, having come from an agency that had a very robust domestic violence program and response, I have a little bit of a unique background. But coming in the door and talking about our domestic violence, we realized that our training of our officers in domestic violence investigations was a little bit inconsistent. And the first thing we did was talk about how are we going to these cases, what are we doing, looking at the reports, and really putting a critical eye on how we're responding. The end result of that is during our May in-service training, we partnered with the Lane County District Attorney's Office and had them come into our in-service training where they were able to train every single one of our officers to a baseline in domestic violence investigations. If you follow where I'm going to go with this, we now have every police officer in our agency trained to the same level. There's no inconsistency in our training. And one of the things that we talk about is to emphasize and prioritize a victim-centric model where as best as we can, being sensitive and caring, and I know our officers are, but just reiterating that and talking about it in these cases, which is super critical and super important. One of the things we do now, and the second bullet point is, we now advance the training from our officers from here. So we identify those officers within the agency that have a knack for domestic violence cases. We engage them, provide them some advanced training, and we start to build a little bit of a domestic violence response mechanism within our agency where we go back to our resource allocation, our resource available, where we have specialized domestic violence officers working and there's a domestic violence case, then that's the resource that we want to apply. That is ongoing right now. All of this is either happened or it's occurring right now. One of the other things that we have going on within the agency is right now, if we go to a non-criminal domestic violence event, by our policy, we are to reclassify that to a dispute. And, you know, there's some flexibility into whether that gets reported. This is something that we have to resolve also within the agency. And for me, the resolution is, instead of we classify it to a dispute, we reclassify it to a non-criminal domestic violence case. Because as it stands, our ability to track our non-criminal domestic violence events is scarce at best. And that hurts us because we have an inability right now to look at, in totality, how many domestic violence incidents did we respond to and how many resulted in arrest. The only way we can do that is going back through every single dispute report that we have had and then reading them to determine, is there a domestic violence nexus to these, or was it just two people that were arguing on the street or otherwise? And we may have some other things in place there that would allow us to do a little bit of more robust searching, but that's very generically a little bit of the problem. So we're in the process of doing that right now. We're going to change from a dispute to non-criminal domestic violence, and then apply the policy that we have in place that we're talking about tonight, and ensure that our officers are actually reporting outward on that. And that does a number of things for us. Not only does it help us to, but we do not have a threat assessment program here within the Eugene Police Department. As we look forward into the future, we need to seriously consider developing a threat assessment team of some kind to actually look at some of these events and start to classify or categorize some of these events that we're seeing. And so that's something that is conceptual and down the road and would spin off what we're looking to do here. But that is currently where we are, and the very, very near future, we're going to resolve this dispute thing. So
I saw V's hand. I saw Silver. Do you still have a?
I do. What does it mean to have a knack for dealing with this situation?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a slang term, but I apologize for that. So a knack would be those officers that have a little bit more of a tendency to be better at interviewing, particularly victims. When they're interviewing, they're able to pick up some nuances of interviewing, such as some emotional cues that you would see as you're that would indicate trauma and some different things. So knack is not a very good word. Hopefully that kind of clarifies that a little bit there. My bad, shouldn't have used that word.
V and then Bonnie.
Yeah, this is a very important topic and an important conversation we're having, Captain Adams. But one of the things that I'm wondering about is, when we talk about domestic violence, I'm assuming that this includes child spanking, and you have a father and a mother hitting the child, spanking the child, and you have the kid running around the house screaming Bloody Mary, and the neighbors then hear it, calls the police responds, and then you have a situation where somebody's going to get arrested. Is that not the case? Okay.
No. So that's a very unique case, and it's a great point. We as parents have the right to discipline our children within our home. So what the officers will do is they'll go and they'll interview all the parties in that situation, and they'll look at, was the discipline reasonable or was it excessive? If that discipline crosses the line from a disciplinary technique designed to get the child to do what's desired, mm-hmm. as opposed to an assault or something that's different and aggressive, that's where the officers will make that determination. And so we all have the right to discipline our children. And that is a very, very difficult as you can imagine, very difficult investigation for officers.
Mm-hmm.
I know that probably every single officer we've had has had that conversation with a parent at one point or another during an investigation, but that's what occurs. So even though we talk about mandatory arrest, and you could arrest children for assaulting parents, it could happen.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, just because we go to something, that's not how that piece of the law is applied.
Yeah, I think that's important because there are, I mean, Eugene is a salad bowl or a melting pot of cultures. And you have people coming even from another state where, corporal punishment for kids are allowed. And then you go into a different state where it's banned. And even I didn't know about the Oregon law on the mandatory arrest until you said it. And so I think that it's important to educate the parents, for the officers to educate the parents. And when there's a language barrier, to bring in an interpreter or use your language bank to do that, because, the last thing we want is to arrest somebody who didn't understand about the law. And they might have just been here for a few years, from a different country, and then suddenly they have this track record of criminal records following them around, and they can't get a job or can't get in a place to live. So that is something I hope would be done when an officer responds.
Yeah, obviously my tenure here with Eugene's a little bit limited, but I mean, I'm 26 years in law enforcement in Oregon, 27 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall a time where we've ever arrested, a parent for disciplining a child in a home. But I mean, Navasha and Ryan would probably have better local information than me and can maybe chime in, but I've not seen it in my time here. And certainly we would, run through our interpreters and we would interview, and that's a very serious case. And that may even draw detectives as well. So.
I've got Bonnie and then Jennifer.
Remind me, sorry, what is the previous way that you used to address these issues or call them? What did you call them before you just called them disputes? What did you call them?
Right now, they're currently called disputes. So if an officer is dispatched to domestic violence call and it's not criminal in nature, by the policy that we have in place, they change that nature code to a dispute and then they clear the case. What I'm advocating for, and in this, I apologize, this is a little bit cart ahead of the horse because we are not prepared internally within the department to bring this forward to the commission for this recommended change right now. Ryan and I have talked about this, that what we want to do is we want to revise policy to indicate that you don't change it to a dispute, you change it to a non-criminal domestic violence incident. But right now we do not have the nature code in our records management system to be able to accommodate that. And that's going to take a coding change to our database. And that's just going to take a little bit more. And so we're going there, it's going to happen. It's just going to take us a little bit more time. And this kind of bumped up on us a little quicker than I had anticipated with the commission, but that's where we want to go.
Oh, and so that includes you're actually creating a whole assessment, like a threat assessment? Is that part of the threat assessment thing that you were talking about that you're planning on working on?
No, that wouldn't be part of the threat assessment. A threat assessment would be, we'd build a threat assessment team and include victim advocates. We'd include individuals from the district attorney's office, school district, police department, DHS. This would be a broad-based team. And what they would do is staff cases. So if we had a significant domestic violence case, and I'll just throw out there, we have an individual that's saying, I'm going to kill this person. They have 3 violations of restraining order. They're escalating in their behavior. That would be one that we would want to take to some type of a threat assessment team to sit and talk about, okay, this individual is doing A, B, or C. Where do we put them? And there is scoring matrices that you can actually apply a matrix to some of these individuals and come up with a score with different avenues of action from there. So this would be a broad-based team. This is obviously your multi-jurisdictional, multi-members. We do not have anything like this, to my knowledge, in Lane County. So this would be something we would have to spool off the ground, and that'll take some work. So 2 separate things.
I guess what I'm wondering is, it sounds like there is some level of importance that's being placed on going from dispute to non-criminal domestic violence as a label. And I guess what I'm wondering is there, I mean, it seems to me that there might be some value in almost, well, I think non-criminal domestic violence, I think, takes away some of the potential danger that's there. So I'm wondering if part of the scoring matrix includes like a code of like, of kind of saying this may be a non-criminal domestic violence case, but this is the threat that we have assessed is possible for this particular case. So kind of does what I'm saying kind of make sense?
Yeah, allow me to ask a clarifying question, which I think I had the same, or I had a misunderstanding at first. This might address yours as well, Bonnie. And forgive me, I'll be speaking in pretty blunt terms. Obviously, we always deal with pretty sensitive topics, but if you arrive at an incident where a husband has beaten a wife, that would be an instance of domestic violence. However, if you arrive based on yelling, where no violent, like actual violence has occurred, but it is domestic in nature, it would be labeled as a non-violent domestic incident. Correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you summed that up much better than I did. Other than we would go non-criminal incident, non-criminal domestic violence incident. And just to kind of go back to Bonnie's point, the reason why we want to do that is because we could go to a dispute that would be something other than a domestic violence case. And so, we may have 50,000 dispute calls in a year, and 25,000 of them are domestic violence cases. But right now, unless we went through every single case, or if there's some other way to search them, we'd have to put a different search string in of some kind. We can't delineate those out. So the behind delineating it out is not necessarily as part of a threat assessment piece. That's actually separate in and of itself, but it would be so that we could better track incidents and events, and also statistically look at, if we've gone to go back to Sean's situation, if we went to a non-criminal domestic previously and we come back to a domestic where there's been a violent assault, then we can easily and readily go back to the other information and reference it. Now, that doesn't mean it's applicable or usable in court. It isn't, but it does give us some information and some different things.
So you're really talking about adding an additional tag for incidents which are now all under a broad umbrella of dispute, which is not super helpful as a label, correct?
Correct.
Excellent. So I've got Amanda and then Jennifer.
Okay. I have a handful of questions. So my first question was, I was curious if you are doing any formal partnerships with Women's Space.
We do work with Women's Space. They are excellent partners. Most of the time that we're using Women's Space is for emergency shelter when we need that. So we go to a domestic violence incident. We know that an assault's occurred between a man and a woman. The suspect, the man, is at large. We do not have him in custody yet there's some fear. That's a perfect example of when we would partner with Women's Space and get some emergency shelter for our victims. Yes, they're great.
And like the safe house as well.
Yes.
That was my other question. Okay. And then I have another question. Do you offer training, or maybe you could speak to this, the types of trainings that you do for the officers on like non-traditional households, so like LGBT couples, like gay men, lesbians, like folks that, and then other folks too, where like maybe the perpetrator is a woman and the victim is a man?
So that's a great point. We do not do any outreach training right now, and normally that's handled through Lane County Victims Assistance or your Victim Assistance programs, even Women's Space. So we right now do not provide any training out into the community. But I say that's a good point because it also goes into something that we're looking to do here down the road where we build our own internal domestic violence team. So yes.
I think it's also important for DV staff to also note that even within those communities that may not be, what society deems as traditional, the DV statute itself is between sexually intimate partners. So irregardless, it's anybody that's in that umbrella is automatically determined to be, if they are in a domestic violence incident, that would classify them, if that helps answer that.
Yeah, and I was speaking, maybe I didn't say right, but to the training that the officers get. Is that what you were saying, that the officers get trained on this?
So we do get trained on, I think we could have more training on it specifically, yes, but we do get trained on, identifying the sexually intimate couple and what that may look like, because if we do show up to somebody who is same-sex couple, we have, and it is a domestic violence, there's a mandatory arrest, we do have to arrest somebody. And we get trained minimally, I guess you could say. I would like more training though.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
So I saw Ian and then Michael, and then we'll have to move on.
Thank you so much, Captain, for the presentation. It's great to see you virtually. I just have one question and one comment. We were really lucky to hear from the Deputy Chief last time about her work in Hillsborough for I think it's DVRT. And some of the where we're going bullet points seem to have parallels to the domestic violence response team that was created in Hillsborough, specifically number 2 and number 3, adding the internal victims advocate response team and the wraparound supports from the incident until the arraignment. I was wondering, to what extent have y'all kind of replicated the model from Hillsborough? And then also, will there be opportunities for volunteers similar to what is going on in Hillsborough with the domestic violence response team? And if that is going to be kind of subsumed by the volunteers and policing program? And then I just kind of a stray comment is y'all might want to think about working in partnership with Transponder about kind of integrating in training for how to work with same-sex couples and gender diverse non-binary folks.
Thanks, Ian. I wrote that down. If I could, if I could hold on your question for a minute, because I think as I go through this slide, I think I'm going to answer that. So,
excellent. So, Michael.
Oh, I thought this was the last slide, so I'm sorry. I did have a question just real quickly with this one, and hopefully this isn't anticipating in a future slide. Are you under, and I understand you're still early in the planning of this, do you understand the internal domestic violence victim advocate response team to be staffed by sworn officers, or would that make use of community service officers, or what would be the sort of mix there?
Yeah, a little bit of a combination thereof. And I think I jumped to this slide ahead of time to give you guys a preview. So my apologies, because I've not gone over this yet. So if you could bear with me for just a minute, let me run through this slide, and maybe it answers everybody's questions, so my bad. So right now, obviously, the deputy chief and the chief came from the Hillsborough model, where they built Washington County has an entire family violence unit, their own standalone building, and the whole gamut. It is really, really, really impressive. I'm not sure at this point that we could get to that level here. So what we're going to do is we're going to build our own family violence unit internally. And what that will be is that family violence unit will be attached to our violent crimes unit. We currently have detectives in there that do all the follow-up on the domestic violence cases, but they're also carrying additional caseload. And what we'll do is move 1 or 2 detectives over there. We'll attach them to just solely family violence, which is mostly just your domestic violence. But you could have spin-offs of, let's face it, our domestic violence cases also have sex offenses attached to them. There's crimes against children within the home. There's things that are difficult to conceptualize when you just say domestic violence. We start talking about family violence and it makes a little more sense. So the idea, conceptual idea is, that's the first piece of this, is we designate our detectives to a family violence unit, and we give them that sole task. Some of the other things that come out of that by doing this is we have very little follow-up with our domestic violence victims right now. And what I'm talking about is photography particularly. So bruising, we all know this, it changes color, does different things over time, subdermally, it's not visible to the naked eye, and we have no follow-up. And so, you know, photographs as an example are super important to the case, which would be something conceptually these detectives would do, and they have a more personable contact or personal contact with the victims of our domestic violence cases. But the big piece to all of this is, and where this whole thing goes to is, we're going to build our own internal domestic violence victim advocate team. And to answer the questions, conceptually, this would be a standalone team. It would function under the family violence unit as a subcomponent. It would be led by a civilian supervisor, and it would be staffed entirely with volunteers. And the conceptual idea with all of this is we get volunteers. We would send our volunteers to a minimum of a 40-hour basic training. We'd like to go 80-hour basic training in advocacy. And those volunteers would fill the bill where at the time of arrest, we would have them respond to the scene to engage immediately with our victims at the time of arrest. And they would provide victim support from the time of arrest up until the time of arraignment, when the Lane County Victims Assistance would take over, and we would have a good handshake there, collaborative work. And ultimately what happens out of this is, from the moment of arrest to the moment of trial, our victims of domestic violence are supported in some way, shape, or fashion by an advocate, specially trained, and can answer the questions that may be asked of them about the process. What do we know about domestic violence cases? And I talked about there's the economic leash that are attached to these things. There's the threats of violence. There's what am I going to do with my family? What are others going to think? These are all things that your domestic violence can come in after the officers have made the arrest, and they can really fill a missing void. And we go all the way back to page 1, and Dallas, I think you hit on it when you were talking about it. This is the way that we're going to impact our numbers, because we have civilian volunteers who are not police officers come out, and they engage with domestic violence victims. The more they do it, the more trust is built. That's going to permeate through our community. Our community is going to understand, all our community is going to understand that we, first of all, take these cases very seriously. And then secondly, that there is support structure that comes in underneath these cases. So we know that this is the way to impact these numbers, and we know this is the way we go. And this is what's happening. This is best practice across the country. You go 2 different angles. Either you create and build your own internal domestic violence team, or pardon me, you partner with somebody within the community and have them fill the service, in this case, potentially women's space. We like to see it internally, as we're going to have these advocates. They could be responding in the middle of the night to a domestic violence case, and most likely will. So that's kind of where we want to go with this program. Now, timelines are pretty important, because every minute or every day that we're waiting, we're getting further behind the curve on this. Mm-hmm. We'd really like to reallocate some CSI money to build the family violence unit. And that may have some possibility as we get down the road on this. And it may also be possible for us to utilize CSI funding to fund the civilian supervisor of this team. And there's some other superfluous stuff, not superfluous, but infrastructure wise, where we would need car and some radios and some different things, support funding, infrastructure. That's where we want to go. Now, CSI is great. Our backstop to that is VAWA funding. Violence Against Women Act offers funding, and we can tap that federal funding to build this team. The unfortunate part about that is, and why we've been on pause as we are, the grant cycle that's running doesn't come back open again until 2023. We missed it by about 4 months on the last go round. So unless some money freed up that one of the other entities in the state was not going to use, then we have to wait until 2023 to try to tap some VAWA funding to make this happen. We've got all the grant proposal essentially written. We tried to give it a crack earlier, but we're just too far behind. And so we're ready to go, which is exactly where all those numbers came from. It's kind of nice to have them for this presentation. That's where we're trying to go. That's kind of where we are in a nutshell in the overview of domestic violence. And hopefully that answered a lot of questions there, Michael. And I can't remember who else had the other one, but hopefully that cleaned that up.
Yes, I have
one question. Just
I have one more, and then we'll jump to you, Dallas, and then Michael. My question was for, you talked about like this semi-autonomous support services. Is there a tie-in where domestic violence perpetrated by police could be independently investigated or supported, the victims supported as part of this model?
Yeah, so twofold. The independent investigation, it would be, but you know, when I say independent, we may be talking two different things. If we right now to have an officer accused of a domestic violence incident, we would freeze that. We would have another agency come in and do the investigation. We wouldn't touch it. And so that absolutely, we would do that. And then the infrastructure, the support structure from the team, we would really have to look, if it was one of our members that ultimately got arrested and their significant other was the victim, we might have a conflict of interest on that with our domestic violence advocate. So it's a great point. I hadn't even thought of that one. So as we build policy for this, that's something we're going to have to put into place.
Okay. We might have like a tertiary reliance on women's space for that specific thing, rather than doing it internally. Dallas and then Michael.
My only question is, do you know, have you come up with a price as far as what it would cost? And the reason why I ask that is if you could come up with that price, whatever that amount is, in lieu of waiting 3 or 4 years, whatever it is, before you got it, could with this plan and what you're talking about, something tells me there's people in this community that would put that money up for you if they know exactly what's going on right here. So my question is, are y'all working on the cost, or where are we at in that phase?
Yeah, we have the cost.
I'm suggesting private money to start that.
Yeah, that's great. That may be something we can do. We have the costs. So we know what this will cost. And I apologize, I don't have it in front of me and I'd have to go somewhere else to get it. But to push the domestic violence advocate team is not a lot of money. It really is not. But what we have to also consider, though, is the sustainability of this. And, you know, that's one factor that would have to come into it if we're going to use community money to build a program like this. I love the idea. Don't get me wrong when I say this. CSI is out there, and, you know, that's community money right there that we could tap. But it does, we thought we would, obviously thought we would be a lot further along in that process than we are right now. So that would be something we could certainly, I'll staff with Chief Skinner and see what his thoughts are with that.
And the only reason why I say that is to me, it's not a tough sell. There's people who are multimillionaires in this community who might have a daughter who has been a victim of this. And if they knew that there was a program that was designed that if that was in place, something bad would not have happened to their child, sometimes those checks are a little bit easier to write.
Thanks, Dallas. Michael?
Yes, thank you. And apparently there's so many alpha males in the room that it doesn't pay to use the raise hand feature when you want to ask a question. But I have, so thank you, Captain Adams, for all of this. This is really interesting, really great. I was wondering, so you did a great job of presenting that. Thank you for showing that there's these two models, the in-house or the partner model. I wonder if there might be I can imagine an argument for a third model, which would be developing both response teams separately in parallel, in tandem, so that victims might have an option, right? If they feel more comfortable with one or the other. Of course, I imagine the disadvantage of that would be resource conservation, right? It's cheaper to only have to put all our eggs in one basket and develop one. Less of a strain on community resources. But given that, and you made another mentioned another pro in favor of the in-house model, which I've already forgotten what it was, but what was the reason for it? You preferred it anyway. I don't remember what you said, but I'm wondering if before moving forward, we might, since we are at an early stage with this still, if there might be a chance to develop like sort of a quick analysis of, or maybe not a quick analysis, maybe a nice study of those three options and what the pros and cons would be of each, where different examples exist. And it sounds like you've already started to do this work of looking around at best practices, but it might just be nice from a commission point of view, and I imagine the city council point of view, to sort of see laid out, this is what this model looks like and what the pros and cons of it are, what the costs are. This is what this model looks like or might look like, and what the pros and cons are and what the costs are. And then the third option, right? Just so that we could have a richer conversation. But obviously it's great to be bringing this to us at this early stage. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and if I could just touch on that for just a moment. That's one of the strengths that in the several, but when you have domestic violence advocates in-house and they're right there with your detectives that are doing the investigation, then you have the direct cross collaboration. And that's really the largest benefit to having something like this in-house. And most everybody will look at it and think this is a control thing, which it totally isn't. It's a communication and collaboration piece. But your point's not lost on me that, I mean, there's probably members in this community that would not want to participate in that if it was attached to the police department. We'll just call it bluntly. And, you know, that's something we have to look at and consider when we're looking at alternatives. So I do have some notes here on that, and we'll see what we can come up with.
I have two thoughts on that. If anybody else has any last minute, please raise your hand. My thoughts are, you know, having an option, we double the resource cost, and people reject the one associated with the police just because it's associated with the police. Doesn't seem wise to me to have an option in light of that. And the other concern I have is oversight of non-internal bodies. You know, if there's a domestic support team that is not housed under the police department, who provides oversight and how is oversight administered in that situation? So those are my concerns going forward. I don't have any solutions yet, but pros and cons to both sides. Bonnie?
I'm just wondering how the family violence unit, if at all, might relate to sexual assaults. So I know that that's kind of different, but I think also some of the response might be somewhat related. You still need that helping hand and resources. So I'm wondering, like, can that be shared in any kind of way? Or what do you see the connection might be?
I missed the part about the sharing part.
So would the family violence unit also be addressing sexual assault cases where it's not necessarily, you know, like it's something that happened in the home, but it's also
yeah, exactly. And that's the strength. One of the strengths of having a family violence unit is we have detectives attached to that can address any myriad of crimes that occur in the home that are a result. And we very, very frequently, we see sex assaults of some type attached to these domestic violence incidents. So having that resource there as detectives to be able to go right at that and, you know, and investigate, the ability to investigate any crime up to murder, which, I mean, we had one January last year. So
I guess what I'm referring to is actually more sexual assault being not within the home, but being more like something that happens in the community, like date rape or just random victimization. Because my understanding is that the way that you want to address a victim is somewhat related to domestic violence. So I guess I'm wondering how the resources would be used, or could they be? That's where I'm asking about the sharing of resources.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think I got you now. So any of those other cases would be handled by violent crimes detectives, so that would occur. And then some of the other things that we have in place in Lane County is there's advocate team, rape victim advocate teams, sexual assault response teams that would come in behind and underneath those to provide support services for victims of a sexual crime of some nature. So there's support services there, and they would also get a detective if there was some cross collaboration that would occur as far as we have a domestic violence implication like the date rape thing. We would determine where that would fall in within the violent crimes unit, whether it would be a violent crimes detective or a family crimes detective that would take that. And that would just all depend on, that's case specific. So we would, regardless of the circumstances, a detective would be investigating those cases, and there would be some advocacy underneath it.
Is the training different for them?
No, the training for all our detectives is the same. I mean, we send them all to basic schools, homicide schools, Southern Institute schools. The violent crimes detectives are very highly trained. What we would envision with the family violence unit with those detectives is they would have advanced specialized training in the investigation of domestic crimes in and of themselves. But that doesn't mean that our other detectives aren't already receiving that training. They have already received that training as well. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sweet. We are just about out of time for this topic as well. There are changes to the policy proposed in the packet as part of the draft. Sounds like this team is going to be an ongoing conversation, so I don't imagine this will be the last we hear of it as we move forward. Thank you so much, Captain Adams, for joining us today. Ian, and then Jeremy, or yeah, Jeremy, do you have a point of information?
It's just to clarify, was there any direction given the policy with those current adjustments to give it a current timestamp?
Yeah, so Ian, I saw your hand as well.
Yeah, I have some suggested additions to the policy.
To the policy itself?
Correct, yeah, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Sergeant Nelson. Thank you so much for making sure that there's gender inclusive and diverse language that was identified as a policy in the work plan. Really appreciated seeing that. Some of my recommendations are just adding consistent with other policies like policy 380 child safety and policy, I think it's 1203 related to body worn cameras. But then I also have 2 lines, one that I wanted to include in 320.2 regarding the department recognizing kind of the severe and dynamic impacts of trauma to victims of domestic abuse, and making sure that we have language in there that calls out that officers are giving trauma-informed care that reduces harm and the chance of re-traumatization. And then also in the section on officer safety, just stating some language in there that the department recognizes that responding to domestic violence calls, as well as investigating domestic violence, can cause trauma to officers, and prioritizing officer wellness after domestic violence calls, as well as during investigations. So I can throw that language in the chat, but just wanted to make sure there was some kind of housekeeping around referencing other policies that we have in there, and then citing the priority of the department for trauma-informed care and reducing re-traumatization of victims of domestic violence, and then also prioritizing officer wellness, because I know that that was a through point of our work planning for 22 and 23.
Excellent. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, so I had a couple questions that were about the policy, but those were thoroughly addressed by the presentation. So I had one little recommended adjustment to the wording on 320.4 investigations, letter E. The sixth from the last word, or right before that. So it says photos should be taken of the assailant as well as the victim. Just in order to make the wording consistent with the rest of the policy, I was thinking maybe the suspect or the suspected assailant, since the word suspect is used elsewhere for the aggressor. So just that. And then one quick question, question about 320.12 civil liability. I was wondering if there, I have no idea on this, what the actual situation is. Are officers, can they be held liable if they do not arrest?
Yeah,
okay.
It's a mandated arrest, as Captain spoke about NORS, so it is a requirement for us to arrest. But I don't know if it got mentioned, and I don't remember hearing it, but there also are some specific provisions for officers that protect us when we do make an arrest on these, because again, the state is asking us to make an arrest. So if it comes out later on that there was something that it was different in the investigation as it concludes than what the officer thought at the time, they are pretty protected as far as that arrest goes.
Yeah, and that's clear in 320.12. And I was just thinking, if I were an officer and I were reading like hundreds and hundreds of pages of policies, I might remember this and I might prefer it to be clear that I cannot be held liable for making an arrest in good faith and without malice in any domestic violence case, but I might be liable if I fail to arrest. That might be a nice thing to add.
Gotcha. Okay.
I also think officers are terrified of like making an error in general when it comes to DV. That's just my personal experience. But like for me, if there's anything that's even remotely more so towards a charge of like harassment versus an assault for menacing or strangulation that are mandatory arrest, I consult the sergeant immediately, or I consult a bunch of different officers that are on scene. So I'm more terrified of not making an arrest.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good conclusion for all of our officers. Everybody feels that way. They recognize the severity of it and the reason why the law was put into place. So they are really careful about that.
Excellent. Any feedback on these suggestions or any additional suggestions before we move on to the election of chair and vice chair? Ian.
Should I email these proposed edits and additions to Jeremy, and Jeremy can provide them to Sergeant Nelson? I'm saying that. Okay.
And then I'd like an email of the updated policy to go to everybody. You can reread it if you have additional concerns, but just to save a little bit of time. Captain Adams, did you have something? Okay. Yeah, so we can get eyes on it a second time without taking up more commission space on rereading the policy again. And with that, let us move on to election of chair and vice chair. So we're going to be conducting the election via email, and anybody can nominate anybody for any position. We'll be starting out with chair, and once chair is elected, we will be moving on to vice chair. So to start out, I would like to open the conversation by nominating Dallas for the position of chair. Nominations don't need to be seconded. If you have an additional nomination or an alternative nomination, feel free to speak up now, and then we'll move on to a couple of minutes of folks talking about why they want to be chair or if they accept the nomination, and then we'll send our emails in. So are there any other nominations for chair? Seeing none. Dallas, you want to tell us a little bit about whether you accept and why you want to be chair? You're muted, by the way. You're muted, Dallas.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I accept.
Excellent. Do you want to tell us a little bit about why?
Yeah. So here is my why, and I'm gonna try to keep it short. And the reason why I want to keep it short, but I want to make sure I kind of shared with some of the commissioners my reasoning behind it. Me accepting leadership roles and bringing what I have to the table is something that has been with me for a long time. You know, when I jot things down, I only jot down some things briefly. When, you know, from high school days, I was always the captain of the football team, wrestling team, track team. I was also the student government president. I was the commander of the battalion, cadet colonel. I majored in public administration. I've been a downtown co-owner. I've been a general manager when it comes to a corporate organization with Palm Harbor Homes. In the community, which abroad, I was a president of Mid-Oregon Executive Association, which allowed me to really get a good feedback from business owners in Eugene. But I've also, on top of that, have been a board member of the Black Business Association Professionals. I co-founded the Oregon Black Education Fund with Senator Manning. I've done a lot of service work with the American Cancer Society, as you were all aware of. But the main reason why I wanted to do this is because I've always felt that I'm that person that's not, say, so much to the left or to right or to the middle. I'm just trying to work at what is the best for the people? What do the people want us to do? And how can I bridge a more trust-building relationship with the community? And that's why I want to do it. I choose to be the face of that person that they feel very comfortable with sharing their concerns. And I believe with my over 30 years of being in this community that I help in that matter. And that's why if I'm going to be a part of anything, I have always never shied away from the leadership roles in that. And that's why I accept this nomination.
Thank you, Dallas. Since we have no other nominees for chair, can I get a motion to elect Dallas by acclamation?
Sean?
Jeremy?
We can't use acclamation. It does have to be, in fact, a vote. I just had the city attorney clarify that.
Okay.
So it can be as simple as
a hand vote rather than an email vote.
All in favor, say aye, and then you get So it's I need
is secret ballots. I don't think secret ballots is. I think it is part of our bylaws, though, right?
No, we can use the email version if you want to, and I've already sent that out.
Okay.
If you want to, since there's only the one person.
So since there's only one person, can I get a motion to elect Dallas by hand vote instead?
Move to elect Dallas chair.
Thank you, Alan. Do I have a second? Is that you, Bonnie? Oh, Jennifer, I heard you. Everybody in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Lovely. I was just about to check in. Anybody opposed, say no or raise your hand. Seeing none.
Last chance, Dallas.
Seeing none. Dallas, you will be chair effective July 1st. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Dallas.
I think you'll serve us very well. I look forward to it. So vice chair, do we have any any nominees for vice chair?
Oh, I do. Sorry, I nominate Sean Shivers as vice chair.
Thank you. Do we have any other nominations for vice chair?
I was just about to nominate Silver.
Silver? Excellent. Do we have any other nominations for vice chair?
I have one.
Dallas?
I nominate Commissioner V.
V. Excellent. So let us, I'm writing everybody down.
Ballots are in your email inboxes.
Thank you. Well, before we get to the ballot stage, V, do you want to tell us a little bit about whether you accept the nomination and whether you want to be vice chair, why you want to be vice chair? You're muted, by the way.
I would accept the nomination. I've worked with you, Sean, for some time now, and I really believe that, you know, whoever is the next chair, which is Dallas, there needs to be some continuity in what we've been doing. And I know that Jeremy can convey that to Dallas, but I think, you know, having a vice chair who can also transition, you know, help Dallas to transition to being chair, getting him catch up on, you know, the past history of events that we've worked on, activities that we've worked on, would be important. Excellent. And I have the time for this. And the other thing is I also enjoy support in a supportive role, you know, so I think I would work well with Dallas.
Excellent. Thanks, V. Silver, do you accept the nomination and tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, actually I do. And I will say why. You know, I've had some institutional knowledge of this body for almost 5 years, right? Jeremy, you got my token there? So you don't have to answer, but yeah. So I've been here for a long time, and I know that there was an opportunity presented to me the last time to step into a leadership role, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to step into that role. I give 110% in any commission and any work that I do. And I have worked tirelessly with so many different organizations and committees in this community. And I felt as though I needed to do more in this one. And I look forward to having more of a leadership role in this body, and to being that nice guy that I used to be before the ad hoc committee. So yeah, I would accept the nomination.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Given the sheer quality of the other two nominees, I am honored by the nomination, Bonnie, but I think I will sit this one out. Thank you again. And with that, we can all vote via email for our vice chair. I think we will get to that later because we're kind of tight on time. So we can jump right into the downtown safety discussion while Jeremy tabulates those votes.
So Sean, to confirm, you are requesting that people send them now and then I'll tally them.
Correct. Yes, for clarity, please send them in now, either Silver or V. And we will move to the downtown safety conversation with Sergeant Magnus.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me here. So I saw some of the questions that we saw, so I'll just kind of go into a couple things. There was one question about the zones. Actually, I don't. Do you have specific stuff that you want me to address right away, or do you want me to just kind of start rolling and then see where it goes? Or
since I imagine folks are still sending in those emails, by all means, give us a brief snapshot of the nature of downtown right now, okay. The state of downtown and what's going on there, and then I'm sure questions are going to come up as we go. All
right, sounds good. So this is my third year supervising downtown. Right now, well, since COVID kicked in, it's definitely changed the dynamic of downtown. With the lack of resources that are there, the library, the dining room being grab and go only, and then just a lack of business folks typically downtown, we really aren't seeing as much problematic behavior as what we typically see. Also with the shutdowns we saw last year, we typically see a large traveler population arrive as the weather gets nice. And we did not see that last year. And so far we haven't seen as much as we usually do this year. We are seeing some, but not on the magnitude that we generally do see. So it's kind of an interesting time downtown because there's just not the draw per se to have a lot of the problem behavior that we typically see down there. However, there's also not as much people that, that are down there for work, and other activities that are, I guess, that using downtown in a positive manner. So you've got this kind of stark standout whenever any problem type stuff's going on. You see it a lot more because there's just not the, I guess, blur of so many other folks downtown. So we're not really as busy as we usually are, just because there's not, we're not getting the calls, we're not seeing a lot of the stuff. And I think a lot of that's also attributed to what's going on over Washington Jefferson Park, and then 13th and Chambers. So you're seeing a lot of folks that are over there utilizing those spaces and kind of staying out of the downtown core. I do have some concerns when those models shift away to whatever the city determines as safe camping locations, where those are going to end up and what that may do to downtown. But that's yet to be seen. So like I said, it's definitely a different time for us down there. And then, yeah, we're just kind of working through that stuff. So we're just trying to be more creative in the work that we're doing, trying to come up with some different projects to try to work with our partners down there and see what we can do. We've worked with detectives a little bit and done a couple bait bike operations to kind of utilize our resources to address those sorts of things. So those are kind of the big things that we're seeing downtown. So I guess, do you have any questions per se? I know there was a concern about the maps and kind of how everything lays out, and I can certainly address and talk about the extreme confusion in our different zones that we have. If any of you have ever seen the DAS, the core, our footprint, the smoking area, it is a nightmare to try to navigate unless you inundate. And even my officers, many of which have been there years, they still have to sit there and give a lot of thought, like, are we in this zone or are we not in that zone? So
excellent. Yeah, so my question is about the maps, but I saw Ian's hand first. We'll do Ian, Michael, and then myself. You're muted.
I was just following our new chair's lead. I just wanted to say hi, Sergeant Magnus. It's a pleasure to meet you. And Sergeant Smith has just been a masterclass in the walk along we went along downtown, just how challenging policing downtown can be, and understanding the policy implications and overlays that are there. I wanted to comment kind of briefly on some of your concerns about downtown. And I just wanted to really kind of put my enthusiastic support behind what the city of Eugene is proposing for council consideration on the 23rd for the safe camping spots. In the Whitaker, where I live, having unhoused members of our community feel comfortable in the Whitaker is a feature, not a bug. The nonprofit organization that I serve on the board of has members who are formerly unhoused and they chose to shelter in the Whitaker. And so disproportionately, unhoused members of the community are sheltering in the Whitaker through the pandemic. And 2 of the proposed safe shelter sites are near my home at near 6th and Chambers. And I'm hoping that we can work with the city and the property owners to have some of those unhoused members of the community shelter in the Whitaker after Washington Jefferson's demobilized. Kind of one of the dynamics of downtown that really strikes me is how on walk-alongs with officers, they help folks continue to navigate service providers, help folks who are unhoused navigate services with service providers. And I was wondering if you could talk to a little bit about some of the training and dynamics you have with your officers to help folks navigate services, particularly during the pandemic. When I did one walk along, they navigated folks who were sheltering downtown to Washington Jefferson Park, because that was one of the places that the city had sanctioned. And I'm hoping with the new safe shelters if council gives guidance to move forward with the 12 or so proposed sites, that's something that can be continued, in which I witnessed one call of a person who was sheltering in front of a downtown business. Officers called cahoots. I think it was Officer Alvarez called cahoots, and they navigated folks to Washington Jefferson Park. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, we don't know what council is going to say, but just talk a little bit about the way that you've interacted with service providers for the unhoused and how you're going to continue to do that, irrespective of what direction comes from council around the different sites which may or may not be activated.
Sure. Well, you kind of nailed it. Cahoots is, for our purposes out on the street, and any of our officers within the agency, Cahoots is kind of our go-to means to direct people towards resources that are available, because we can guide them towards Washington Jefferson Park. However, if they don't have any resources right there, we're not really helping them. We're just giving them a place to potentially land, which could be better than what they're at right in the situation they're in. However, it's still just kind of a Band-Aid, whereas Cahoots can definitely address the situation on a broader scale. If they need, kind of look into what resources they need. If they need a tent, if they need a sleeping bag, if they need food, if they need socks, which a lot of these folks desperately need. So Cahoots is definitely our big go-to to address those sorts of things. Dusk to Dawn, the campsite out on 99 is another one that we certainly refer people to, and we do call them to see if they have availability when we run into these sorts of situations, if we have somebody that needs a safe place to go. So those are kind of the big ones that we're addressing. I know there had been a question about the court team, the community outreach team that we used to have. That has ended. It ended the end of last year. And that, for those of you that aren't familiar with what it was a partnership between us and primarily Whitebird or Cahoots. So we had, it was a collaborative approach with folks in Whitebird, and then some of our downtown officers that had repeated contact with folks that we typically saw downtown over and over again that needed resources. So the goal was, instead of continuing to have them just be a call for service, whether they're camped out in front of somebody's business or having some sort of other problems downtown, we can try to develop a plan to get them some resolution of what's going on. That's since moved on. There is it's called under, I guess they termed it Unified Command. It's under the city manager's office, and I believe Regan Washus is heading that up. So it's not abandoned, it's just being kind of reworked through the city manager's office and what that's going to look like. And they're still in the infancy stages of how that's going to work. But they presented today at the all city meeting, and it looks pretty impressive what their goals are and what they're going to try to address. I mean, very, very similar to what we do on our court team, but on a much larger scale. So it's pretty exciting to see what they've got going on right there, and hopefully they're successful in moving that forward.
Excellent. Thank you. I've got Michael and then myself.
Yeah, thank you. So I had to Google bait bus or bait bike in order to find out what it was. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about that.
Sure. So Eugene, if you're not aware or haven't been the victim of, hopefully nobody has, but we have a lot of bicycles. We have a lot of bicycle theft. So it's a very big problem in our community. So some places have developed bait bike programs, and we have as well. So what we have is a few different bicycles that have GPS trackers on them. And what we'll do is basically go out to certain areas where we've had bicycles stolen before, and we'll place the bicycle there and then see if we get somebody that's going to come steal the bike. So it's pretty common that when we put a bike out there, it does get stolen. So, and then we're able to track it and recover the bike, and then we charge them with a theft. It goes through the court process. So the goal is to hopefully get people to stop stealing bikes. I don't have any information if as far as if there's, we're seeing change in patterns and that kind of stuff, but it's a tool to try to address that behavior that's going on.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of thing that maybe people should know about in order for it to reduce the people have to know what it is.
It's, you know, honestly, it's pretty well known. I'm actually a cyclist, and I saw on a Facebook group, a mountain bike group that I'm part of, somebody spotted one of our bikes. They're like, I just see this thing sitting here unlocked. I don't know if it's, you know, if it's a stolen bike or a bait bike. And so
I don't bike, so that's probably why I don't know what it is.
You also didn't mention that's a really nice bike. It's got to be a really nice bike, not a clunker.
Yeah, we do have they're both that we have 2 or 3, and I think they're both valued, or all of them are valued at over $1,000. So they're decent bikes that we have.
I didn't know bikes could be that valuable.
That's the kicking off point. So
yeah, so I've got my question is in regards to those maps. Do you happen to have a shareable version so that folks can see the mess that downtown?
Let me share the screen.
You might there we go.
We see that. So kind of see the downtown areas. This is one Jeremy put together. So you can see the red box that we have right there. That's our downtown. So that's what my team is primarily responsible for. So we have 5th to 15th, Lincoln to High, as well as Chernow Mulligan Park. Those are our primary areas of responsibility. So when we have officers working, if they're available, we will try to get to those calls for service. So you can see we've got downtown as well as a bit of midtown. So we're definitely spread out when we go all over the place. And then there's other times too where our staffing is such on patrol that we get pulled out. I mean, it's not uncommon for my officers to get pulled all over the city when we've got a lot of calls going on. So we try to stay within our zone and provide the services there, but there's often times that it does get pulled out. The other maps that are kind of on there, now let me pull up a different one here. So this is the DAZ. This is the Downtown Activity Zone. And what this is where we have some different city code that's specific to this area, that we can enforce to address some of the problematic behaviors that we typically see in downtown. So you can see it's pretty much just the core, 6th to 11th, Lincoln to High. So within that area, there's certain things that aren't allowed, like as far as the sidewalks. So there has to be 8 feet of unobstructed sidewalk. So that's going to preclude people from blocking that and creating problematic behavior in those types of areas. People can't set up displays. Now what are some of the other ones?
Yeah.
You can't place a newspaper dispenser in a restricted area, in case anybody was curious about that.
Yeah.
Also interfering with an authorized activity. So when we have permitted events and that kind of stuff. So those are kind of some of the ones that are within there. So again, we've got our area that we're responsible for. Then and when we have certain behavior that's going on, we need to know where it's going on exactly to determine if we have the downtown activity zone rules to take enforcement. And then not to confuse things even more, then we have this map, which is the core. So this is also part of our the downtown activity zone, but the core has some additional rules within the city code that are only enforceable within this area. So again, our officers have to know, all right, is what they're doing within the core or not. So that people might be doing certain activities that are allowed within the DAZ in that larger box, but not within the core down here. So
Sergeant Magnus, some of your maps aren't updating, so we can't see things like the DAC, just a heads up.
What's not showing?
We have the general downtown areas, but if you're switching to show specifically the DAC, it's not necessarily populating here. It's stuck on the first map.
Okay. So my question sort of, I think it's important that everybody understands how messed up it is. My question is, what would be the negative side effects of expanding the core and the safety zone and the DAC to encompass that full yellow area? Because I find on my walk-alongs when I went with Sergeant Smith before the pandemic that it seems silly to me to expect Eugene citizens to know the rules when the people even responsible cannot possibly be expected to, at a moment's notice, do the calculations to figure out all of the overlapping mess. So would there be any downside to expanding up some of those smaller areas to make it contiguous and hopefully a little bit simpler for our officers and our citizens?
I don't think so. I think that if we're speaking just that yellow box, I would encourage it. If we're going to try to simplify this thing and make it more appropriate, I would say make it larger. And I would say include down to probably 3rd and then incorporating the new riverfront project that's going to go on. And I say that because 5th Street Market, all the additions that are down there, that's creating a large draw of people that are transitioning throughout downtown, which is we're already seeing an increased call for service in that area. But then also with that riverfront, that's just going to flow, everything's going to kind of flow together. So I would, if you all wanted to encourage council to look at extending the DAS and the out, I would say focus on going south and then to the east over to the riverfront, because we're definitely going to want to ensure those areas flourish and really create that positive, inviting environment for people to come down. So
excellent. And I didn't hear any negative potential ramifications. Okay, good.
No, it's I mean, it's just more tools for us to be able to use, and then ensure, like I said, that we're seeing the positive behavior that's going on down there. That's what we want to encourage is that, and be able to ensure people are feeling safe and enjoying their time in these areas.
Excellent. So I do not want to be prescriptive when it comes to city council, but I would love this commission to recommend considering expanding these and making them contiguous to city council. Unfortunately, I cannot make motions. So if somebody...
May I ask a quick question first?
Yeah, by all means.
I just want to clarify what I'm looking at. So you've used the acronym DAS, is Downtown Activity Zone, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that the same as the yellow, the watch area, or is that the same as the red, the reporting area?
Sorry, I'm trying to...
Because what I see is purple or... Oh, go ahead.
So the Downtown Activity Zone runs from 6th to 11th, Lincoln to High. Is the actual downtown activity zone.
Okay, so that is the, so it's a little bigger than the yellow zone, the watch area, because the watch area only goes to 7th. Is that correct?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Okay, I find this map fascinating, by the way, as someone who lives within the apparently the operational zone, but not in the neighborhood. I'm in one of those blocks that's cut in half at the bottom there, so by the orange line, which I had no idea of. So this is great.
Yeah. So
I don't believe that the bylaws disqualify you from making a motion. Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong.
You don't believe that the bylaws preclude who from making a motion?
Me.
You mean, no, I don't. Yeah, no, I think you
can make a motion.
I have been living a lie. So I move that we recommend council consider expanding the core and sorry, I'm colorblind, so this is extra hard for me. The core and the safety zone and the watch area in a way that, and the downtown activity zone in a way that is consistent. Period.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment that we include the riverfront and market district areas per Sergeant Magnus's suggestion.
So since we're not recommending how far they expand them, and I don't want to, I would not consider that a friendly amendment. And I would just leave it up to council and let them decide that. Jeremy?
Just a police commission's purview is to review police policy and procedure. These maps, I don't believe, are outlined anywhere in police policy or procedures. We can make a recommendation,
yep,
but it's generally based on the department's need at the time or the city's need at the time. So
yeah, and in keeping with our trust and policing alternatives are charged to increase public trust, I think having a bunch of conflicting rules undermines the trust of our police department, and so that's how I see it as falling within the police commission's purview. But I see Alan's hand.
Yeah, maybe you can tell us why these are all different, and are some by ordinance, some by police policy, or some by chief's orders, or
that these were all created long before my time. My belief is that these are all created by council at some recommendation at some point to develop them, and the zones that they originally created. I don't know why it was determined to be that area. My guess is it's been around for a while. So at that point, when they were looking at creating those rules and that city ordinance, that's what the appropriate area they felt to encapsulate this area or this problem.
Okay, thanks.
Dallas?
And this is just one of those things that I scratch my head a little bit. This map, the only way it's going to be changed, expanded, or whatever, has everything to do with the viewpoint of what the city council chooses on this map. Mm-hmm. And if that is the case, as far as I'm concerned, there's 2 city councilors on this commission right now. So if we're not hearing from them saying we want this change, where they could take it back to their council and have that conversation, we're kind of spinning our wheels.
So
there's
like multiple ways for it to get back to city council. One is for either the say what?
City council is currently on the committee.
Yes.
And we have, and this is not a police policy. So the point that I'm making is, if either Councilman Zelinka or Councilman Week, if they're not on board with this, I'd like to hear from them. If they're not on board for this, guess what? That's a zero, nothing going to happen before we even shut.
It hasn't even been seconded, so at this point it's dead on arrival anyway.
Sean, so let me talk to that. So this is a historical artifact, I might say. Yeah. Over time, different decisions made by different councils to do different things, and I've never seen this map before.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's a problem, and the police haven't said it's a problem. So
I highly recommend going on a walk along in downtown, because that's where I learned it was a problem.
Yeah, and if it's a problem, then it's kind of probably an easy fix with a recommendation from the chief. But these are probably done through ordinance, I would think.
Yeah.
Which means that to do that requires a public hearing and going through a multi-step process, and which is kind of a big process. We've got a lot of things on the agenda. I'm just wondering, maybe Sergeant could talk to, does it make any difference if we change it? I mean, what's the effect of going through all that process?
It's going to eliminate a lot of confusion for both EPD staff as well as citizens, just because it's a lot easier for us to sit there and say, well, you're not allowed to do this, and here's the box, versus, well, you can't do this right here, but you can go right there. but you can do this here, but not there. And like the smoking ban is a very easy example for that. Well, you can't smoke here in this corner, but if you go down to that alley right down there, you're okay. Or you can't smoke in front of this bar right now, but you can after 6 p.m. Like I said, I have officers that have worked downtown for 8-9 years, and even some of them have to pause and think about where they're at exactly when we're dealing with certain things. So it is very confusing for us, and it's very confusing for the community. And you're absolutely right. It is a process to change this. It would take multiple steps. I believe it would probably have to be brought forward by, at least worked through by the attorney's office and that kind of stuff. I believe that's why it hasn't evolved where it probably should.
Sean, what's your motion again?
For city council to figure out basically how to expand these things in a way that's consistent. Right. I leave it that vague because, like Ian brought up, and Sergeant Magnus brought up, exactly how far you expand it, especially with the new riverfront stuff going in. I don't feel like that is under our purview, but, taking it to council and saying, hey, this is a problem, I do feel like increases and will increase the efficacy of our police department.
Yeah, if your motion is to make the zones consistent, then I would second it.
Excellent. So I've got a front and a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, everybody in favor say aye or raise your hand. Aye. So anybody opposed, say nay. Dallas? Nay. Anybody abstaining, go ahead and raise your hand. That's Silver and V. And I'm assuming Chantel is also abstaining.
Yes, sorry.
No worries. Excellent. So I believe the motion passes.
Yes. It's not going to be super high on the agenda, but.
No, and I don't expect it to be. I made a promise to Sergeant Smith before she left because it really bothered me that it was so confusing. So thank you. Any additional questions or discussions on the topic of downtown safety? Alan, your hand is still raised. I assume that is done. Okay. Any additional comments, questions, concerns about downtown safety? Well, we have Sergeant Magnus here.
I have one question.
Dallas.
Does he know anything about the setting off on those fires, or what are we doing there in the trash cans? We had a trash cans like this got hit twice, not ours, over there by the Goodyear tire in the back.
We've had a rash of them. So they're being investigated by our arson unit. I don't believe any arrests have been made yet, but they're actively working on it and seeing what sort of video surveillance. That's one thing that whenever we have stuff like this, that our detectives will rely a lot on our downtown officers, because we know where a lot of the cameras are, businesses that have cameras, and we'll try to acquire that footage and see what we can gather for them. So it's not that uncommon for us to have a rash of these dumpster type fires. We just arrested a guy within the last 6 months, probably within the last 2 months, that was setting several trash can stuff on fire. So for whatever reason, people, the allure to fire is pretty common, and it is definitely downtown as a target rich environment to do those sorts of things. So.
So I see V's hand up.
Hi, Sergeant Magnus. Wonderful name. It's very memorable. I met you before when I did a tour of the station. So this is in regards to the bike baiting or whatever you call it. San Francisco had a program like that too. And I think they still have it. It's a wonderful program because it doesn't just help to recover that bike that was stolen. Sometimes, it leads to a whole cache of other stolen items. I remember in one instance, they walk into like a garage, and it was just packed with hundreds of bikes and other stolen goods. So this is, this program, I think is not just to, prevent bike losses and all that. I think it could possibly lead the officers to recovering other items as well. And maybe even relating to drugs and other crimes. Yeah, so thank you for doing that.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions or concerns? I think I'm not seeing any. So thank you so much for joining us, Sergeant Magnus. And hopefully things continue on a good track.
I agree. So it's great to see coming out of COVID, we're starting to see some of the city events being put on downtown. So it's very exciting to see the positive activity and folks coming back downtown and enjoying it again. So we're excited to make sure everybody feels safe and keep the area safe. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. With that, Jeremy, do you have results for the vice chair election?
I do. So it's a tie. You've got
lovely.
Half for Silverio, half for V. Well, there were 11 votes, and one was an abstain. So that is not very helpful. But
6 months.
Again.
Do we have any provisions for this, or can we appoint co-chairs? Or co-vice chairs, I suppose.
We could ask Maisie.
I don't want to put her in a position where she's getting a bunch of campaigning.
I don't think there's a provision for a co-chair because there's just a co-chair in bylaws, but you could do 6 months and 6 months. Be like an Israeli government.
Oh, God. So it lasts 3 weeks. Yeah. So there's no provision for co-vice chairs in the Dallas.
I would like to have a co-chair that's going to serve the whole term.
A vice chair that's going to serve the whole term?
Correct.
Okay.
So we're going to figure out a co-chair.
Yeah. So unless it's disallowed by bylaws, and we might have to check that up real quick, I would propose appointing both of them as co-vice chairs, which I think, that gives the commission the best service, more perspectives at the table. Yeah. And
I'm not sure if that's permitted, to be frank. I've never had this come up. I don't know.
Because it enumerates those offices, and it says vice chair, not co-vice chair. I'm fairly sure.
But is that a bylaws change? Or is that a bylaws? Or is that ordinance?
A commissioner is not here who has a vote. So that person she can only vote for one person. So then redo the vote next meeting.
We can redo the vote next meeting, though you will be chair then. So it will be under your auspice. We will seat no vice chair until next meeting under that plan.
I did receive the request, and can they revote? People could absolutely revote if they wanted to.
Yeah, you sure can.
Change the vote. But you're welcome to do a revote. If
I think we can put this off till next time, and we should look up the bylaws about having a co-vice chair, because that sounds like the best solution, with revoting being second best, because the vagaries of who happens to show up to a meeting can change. And, you know, if we revote next time and, you know, I'm sick and Bonnie's sick and Silver's sick, it's not going to seem fair to anybody that way either.
Oh, okay, so what I'm hearing is if bylaws permit it, then we would have a co-vice chair.
Yes. And since I can make motions, that's my motion.
I second that motion.
Okay. And if not, then we have a revote.
We'll figure it out next time.
Okay.
Everybody in favor of the motion, say aye or raise your hand. Or sorry, first we can discuss this. Does anybody have any discussion on this topic?
What's the motion?
So the motion, your motion is to have 2 co-vice chairs.
Yes, so you would be chair, and then Silver and V would be vice chairs together. Yeah.
That's your motion.
That's my motion.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the topic before we vote? Amanda?
I was just going to say we had this happen in Human Rights Commission, and we did a vote again in the meeting and still had a tie. And then we put off the vote until the next meeting. And then the next meeting, we did not have a tie. But what happened in the following meeting is like some large number of people were not there that were there in the previous meeting. Like 3 people weren't there. So it was like you were speaking to, that it sort of changes the dynamic. So anyway, I know the bylaws are probably different, but there could be similarities, but that's what we did.
With my votes, is that what you're saying?
Well, we cannot call more than half of the commission. So
I mean, I know policy, I know politics, and so
yeah. Yeah, so my motion is to appoint V and Silver as vice chairs, provided it is allowed by bylaws. And if it is not, then we should put off the decision until next time. That is the full motion. I'm seeing no other discussion. Everybody in favor say aye or raise your hand. Anybody opposed, say nay or raise your hand.
Nay.
Alan and Dallas opposed. And anybody abstaining, I guess say quiet. No, raise your hand or say aye, or abstain rather. So I got V, and I'm assuming Chantel is also an abstention.
V and Chantel.
With that, the motion passes.
Good, it's not a tie.
Say what, Alan?
Glad it's not a tie.
Yeah.
Wait, what are we?
I'm going to be calling you, Alan.
Hang on. What just passed? Sorry.
So both of us.
I'm really under the weather right now. So
yeah. Both of us co-chairing if it's not against the bylaws.
Yeah. So if it's not against the bylaws, you and Silver would serve together.
Okay.
As vice chair.
As vice chair. So we'd still have, if we were talking about co-chairs, I would have done something different, but since we're talking about backup,
extremely complicated.
We could be like board.
For the reason that if one co-chair doesn't, is not available to attend a lot of the planning meetings and such, then it's just a title, that's my only concern. Is this is not just a title we're going after. We're whoever is going to be co-chair vice chair is supporting Dallas in his
Dallas work. Will set meetings. Dallas will decide when those planning meetings are. So if somebody can't show up to them, that's on them. We still have the solid leadership of Dallas, so I'm not worried about it. Also, the motion is passed. So let's move on to commissioner comments. Let's start with Bonnie and then Amanda.
But thank you, everybody. That's fine.
Thanks, Bonnie. Amanda and then Ian.
I don't know too much. Just congratulations to Dallas, and thank you, Sean, for all your service over the years. I've enjoyed working with you and getting to know you. I know you'll still be with us, but just as chair. And I think that's all I have to say. Nice to see you all again.
Thanks, Amanda. Ian, and then Jennifer.
Yeah, I hope that Silver and V get matching tattoos if they're just wanted to say, Sean, thank you so much for your leadership as chair. I've learned a lot from you, and I know that I'm going to continue to learn a lot from you. And congratulations, Dallas. I'm excited to continue to learn and serve on the commission with you and you representing us as the chair. Super excited to support you through that. And I just wanted to say I got an email from Amber at Lane County Public Health. We're up to 13 registrations for our clinic on Sunday. And so I will send Jeremy the info. Would love to get at least another 12. And we're going to have a flexible increase in the amount of doses. So thanks so much. Great. And yep, I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thanks, Ian. Jennifer, and then Alan.
Thank you. So yes, so I want to add my thanks to you, Sean, for all the hard work, especially considering you had to do this all through COVID. And I'm sure all of us are so glad that it was not us having to do that. So thank you so much for navigating that. And I will just say that I am not a huge fan of hierarchy. So I think co-vice chairs is an excellent idea. So I hope it is allowed.
Alan, and then Silver.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, for your work. You did a very good job as chair. Good, and thank you for stepping up, Dallas and Silvario and D. And I guess the Police Commission annual report is on the 28th of June, so that's before July 1. So yep. Sean and V will be doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll be the last thing I do as chair. Silver, and then V.
Yeah, you have my 100% commitment to be at every meeting, so no issues there. I'm not a titles guy, V. I would be doing a lot of titles in my introduction if that was the case. But I'm looking forward to if we can serve together, serving together with you all. I'll cut my hair so we can have the same haircut. How about
that? Thanks, Silver. V, and then Dallas.
Congratulations, Dallas. And I appreciate Sean's, leadership and partnership and leading the commission for this past year. As some of you knew, I came in because one of the previous vice chair resigned from the commission. So that created a vacancy. And so I honestly didn't do a whole term as vice chair. But to Ian's point, no tattoos. I'm against tattoos, so I don't have any tattoos, and I will not get one for this. Thank you.
Thanks, V. Dallas, and then Michael.
Yes, Sean, thank you for your leadership and being chair this past year. I'm looking forward to meeting you someday in person. I'm also looking forward to meeting others in person sometime in the near future. These are nice, but I like to do in-person meetings, get to see. As a chair, I will definitely be reaching out to everybody on the board. I'll be reaching out especially when I know something's your passion. And always feel free to reach out to me so I can have a better understanding of things. And we don't have to wait that one time a month. I'm available every day that I'm here. And typically anyone that knows me, I'll answer my phone and get back to you. And we can have a conversation about whatever it is. We might not agree on it, but at least I know where you're coming from. And I'm that type of person that listens to what you have to say, okay? So we are a team, and that type of team element that we're gonna have, hopefully we're able to work with the police in finding ways to help rebuild their trust. And that's what I would like to do with all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Dallas. Michael, and then myself.
Yeah, thank you all. And since tattoos came up again, I will just say that as someone with several and who's also been fully vaccinated, I want to take objection to, or point out a correction to Ian's earlier statement that it's like getting a tattoo. It's not like getting a tattoo. It's much less painful. People should not be afraid to get vaccinated. unless they have other objections, but not because it hurts. It doesn't hurt nearly as much as a tattoo. And Dallas, I'm glad to hear that you are always available. You have an email from me from like maybe September of last year hitting you up for an interview. So maybe we can like arrange that.
That'd be great.
Excellent. Chantel also sent a chat message that she is unable to talk right now, but she thanks myself, Dallas, Silver, and V, and tells her excitement for the future. So for my own comment, thank you all for all the kind words you've said. One of the things that I'm most proud of from my time as chair is the process we went through to get y'all on here. It is, I think, going to pay dividends long into the future, long after any of us are actually on the commission anymore. Yeah, I'm really proud about that. Obviously, we'll still be working on police policy together. We all live in the same community, but thank you all. And I hope everybody has an excellent night. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting.
I think Bonnie has her hand up.
I think she was waving.
I was just waving, but also Dallas, congratulations, because I actually didn't say that. Sorry. I was just like, see ya. I gotta go to the bathroom. So
yeah, congratulations, Dallas.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you all, and have a wonderful night.
Have a wonderful night.